That's what we get. Okay, let's move on to the last question now. Question number 11. Let's do this. It's a differential equation question now. We need to solve the differential equation and find the exact value of tan theta when y equals 1. Okay, it's a 9-mark question now. How do we start with this? First of all, we need to separate the variables. How do we separate the variables? We need theta terms on the right side, y on the left. So it can be written as 1 plus y on the left side as it is. Bring this thing to the left. It becomes e raised to the power minus 3y. So e raised to the power 3y. dy, take theta terms to the right side. And that will give you 1 over 1 plus cos 2 theta, d theta. Variables are separated, right? Now we need to integrate both sides. How do you integrate the left-hand side? On the left side, we have a fraction. None of the fraction rules work here. So what we can do is we can bring the denominator to the numerator. It will become e raised to the power minus 3y into 1 plus y dy. On the right side, we have a fraction as well. Again, none of the fraction rules work here. You can't do, you can't use ln rule, tan inverse rule, partial fractions. None of those rules work here. So how do we think about this? Cos 2 theta. Cos 2 theta is 2 cos square theta minus 1. Yeah, so what we can do is we can write this as 1 over 1 plus 2 cos square theta minus 1. How it helps is 1 and 1 get cancelled on the right side, and we're just left with 1 over 2 cos square theta. And this we know how to integrate. We can take cos square theta to the numerator. So it becomes 1 over 2 into integral of secant square theta, right? So 1 over cos can be written as secant. And secant square, you know, can be integrated directly. Integration of secant square is just tan, right? Derivative of tan is secant square. Integration of secant square is tan. So it becomes 1 over 2 tan theta plus c. That's the integration on the right-hand side, okay? So you get at least 3 or 4 marks up to this point. Now let's look at the left side. Left side is relatively more straightforward in the sense that you know you have to use integration by parts here, right? So the process is going to be longer, but it's not much thinking involved. There's not much thinking involved on the left side. You can just use integration by parts directly. How would you do this? You can break it down into 2 parts. First of all, you can say e raised to the power minus 3y. Let's integrate this separately. And then e raised to the power minus 3y into y. Let's integrate this separately, right? I've just multiplied this. It becomes e raised to the power minus 3y into plus y into e raised to the power minus 3y. All right, now we can just integrate both of them. What's the integration of this thing? E raised to the power minus 3y remains e raised to the power minus 3y, but divide by the derivative of minus 3y, which is minus 3. Plus, what about the integration of this? This is a product. We have to integrate it using integration by parts. Okay, now for this, let's use integration by parts. Remember the formula that we've got for that. Integration of uv dash, that is given by uv minus integration of vu dash. Now, using ILATE, decide which one you should take as u, which one you should take as v dash. Which 2 expressions do we have here? Algebraic and exponential. The one on the right should be v dash. The one on the left should be u. So u is e raised to the power, sorry, u is y. Algebraic is y, right? And v dash is exponential, which is e raised to the power minus 3y. For using the formula, we need u dash. What's the derivative of y with respect to y? That's 1. What's the integration of this? E raised to the power minus 3y divided by 3. Let's just input values in the formula. uv minus integration of vu dash, right? You just need to input values here. U as it is. What's u? U is y into v, which is e⁻⁻³ minus integration of v, which is e⁻⁻³ into u dash, which is just 1. This is what we now need to integrate with respect to y. Let's integrate this further. It becomes e⁻, I can say -1/3 e⁻⁻³ plus 1/3 into y e⁻⁻³ minus, I can write this 3 outside, so it becomes 1/3. And now what's the integration of e⁻⁻³ with respect to y? Integration of this is e⁻⁻³ divided by -3. Okay, I'm sorry. I missed a negative sign there. Yeah, so you have to be careful with your working here. I was just noticing I only had 3 here, which should have been -3. Okay, let me go back there. This should have been -3 here. Okay, so we have e⁻⁻³ and plus e⁻⁻³ into y. It's fine until this point. Plus u into v. V was supposed to be -3 here, and then minus into vu dash. We also have a negative sign here. Now, since that's a negative sign, this becomes minus, this thing becomes minus, and minus into minus, this becomes positive, and then e⁻⁻³ over -3. That's the integration that we get for that part inside. Yeah, so this is what we get. I missed a negative sign there. This is what we have. Now, let's simplify this further. -1/3 e⁻⁻³ minus 1/3 y e⁻⁻³ minus 1/9 e⁻⁻³ equals 1/2 into tan of theta plus c. Now, these two terms are the same, as in they are similar terms. We can subtract them. Minus 1/3 minus 1/9. That's minus 4/9. Right? These two terms are the same, right? Yeah, they do look the same. So that's minus 4/9. So we have minus 4/9 e⁻⁻³ minus 1/3 y e⁻⁻³ I've added these two terms. Okay, that gives me minus 4/9 there. On the other side, I have 1/2 tan theta. And now we need to find the value of c. How do you find the value of c? You put the values that are given to you. Y = 0 and theta = 𝝅/4. Put y = 0 and theta = 𝝅/4. Okay. y0, what does that become? Minus 4/9 into e⁻⁻0 minus, since y is 0, this just becomes 0. On the other side, I have 1/2 into tan of 𝝅/4 plus c minus 4/9. That equals 1/2 into tan 𝝅/4. Tan 𝝅/4 is 1 plus c. And that's going to give you the value for c. What does that turn out to be? Minus 4/9 minus 1/2. And that is giving me minus 17/18. Okay, this is the value of c that I'm getting. Now we put that back in that equation, and this becomes minus 4/9 e⁻⁻³ minus 1/3 into y e⁻⁻³ equals 1/2 tan theta minus 17/18. Okay, this is what we wanted. This is the solution of the differential equation. They did not require any one variable to be the subject, right? So we can just leave it like this. Now, we want to find the value of tan theta when y = 1. And we want an exact value, remember? We want an exact value. keep that in mind. Y equals 1. All you have to do now is put y equal to 1 in this equation and see what that gives you. Put y equal to 1 in this. When we input y equal to 1, that gives us minus 4 over 9 into e raised to power minus 3 minus 1 over 3 into 1 into e raised to power minus 3. On the other side, we have 1 over 2 into tan theta minus 17 over 18. Now let's simplify this. These are now the same terms, similar terms. Minus 4 over 9 minus 1 over 3. That is giving me minus 7 over 9 e raised to power minus 3. On the other side, we've got 1 over 2 into tan theta minus 17 over 18. Now, the LCM of the denominators is 18. I'm going to simplify everything by just multiplying everything by 18. And that gives me minus 14 e raised to power minus 3 equals 9 tan theta minus 17. What does this become? 17 minus 14 e raised to power minus 3 equals 9 tan theta, and tan theta equals 17 minus 14 e raised to power minus 3 divided by 9. That is what we were looking for. This is the exact value of tan theta. See that? Question number 11. Okay, let's use that. Question number 11. Let's have a look at this now. Okay, so again, we have integration, the differential equation. Solve this differential equation to obtain an expression in terms of y, for y in terms of x. Now, how do you do that? First of all, you have to separate the variables. How do you separate these variables? You would get, let me write that down here. X squared dy over dx plus y squared plus y equals 0. Now, you can just take these two terms on the other side first. And that leaves you with x squared into dy over dx equals, I just multiply, minus y squared minus y. Let's multiply dx on the other side. That gives you x squared into dy equals minus y squared minus y into dx. Now take x terms there, y terms here, and that gives you 1 over minus y squared into dy. On the right side, you have 1 over x squared into dx. So the first thing you have to do is you have to separate the variables, right? So this is how you could separate the variables. All right, so we have y terms on the left side, we've got x terms on the right side. Okay. X squared into dy over dx plus y squared plus y equals 0. This is how you could start by separating the variables. Now we need to integrate this. How do we integrate this? Let's integrate the left-hand side and the right-hand side. Now the right-hand side is simpler. It's 1 over x squared. How do you integrate that? You can write x squared in the numerator. That becomes integration of x raised to power minus 2 with respect to x. Okay. Now, what about this? How do you integrate 1 over y squared minus y squared minus 5? We need to think about this. We can start like this. We can say, let's take minus common outside. That will make things simpler. So it becomes minus into integral of 1 over y squared plus y. And now we need to integrate this fraction. Okay. Is that okay until this point? We have just taken minus common from the denominator, so that we're left with y squared plus y inside. And now, how do we integrate this? Think of the rules that we've got. ln rule, that does not work because the derivative of the denominator would be 2y. We can't use that. We can't have 2y in the numerator. Tan inverse rule does not work. That also does not work. We don't have y squared plus a constant. We need a constant. We can't have y term. Tan inverse rule also does not work. Partial fractions will work because you could factorize the numerator, the denominator. The denominator can be factorized like this. You can say this is 1 over y into 1 plus y, or y into y plus 1. That's the same thing, but you could actually factorize like this, and then you can find partial fractions for this. Now the right side can be integrated directly. What's the integration of x raised to power minus 2? You just add 1 to the power, divide by the new power, and you have plus c here on the right side. Now for integrating the left hand side, you would have to do partial fractions. You can't take it to the numerator, that would not help. If you take it to the numerator, you get y squared plus y whole raised to power minus 1. What do you do after that? You can't integrate this because this is not linear. You can't do anything with this. So this is the only way you could do it. You'd have to do partial fractions for this. So now let's stop this working here and find partial fractions for this first of all. So you have 1 over y into y plus 1. That can be written as a over y plus b over y plus 1. Okay, you can check all the other other fractions rules. None of the other rules will work here. Okay. Now, how do you find partial fractions for this? Let's multiply the denominator on the left side to the right. And that will give you 1 identical to a into y plus 1 plus b into y. Now put some values of y here. You can input y equals minus 1, and that gives you 1 equal to 0 plus b into minus 1. The value of b turns out to be minus 1. So that's one thing. And then we input another value for x. We input x equals minus 1 here. Let's try another value of x. We could try inputting y equal to 0 because that will eliminate this term. That gives us 1 equal to a into 0 plus 1 plus 0. And a turns out to be 1. So in partial fractions, this is going to become a is 1, so that's 1 over y minus 1 over y plus 1. This is what we get when we find partial fractions for this thing. Okay, so we can break it down into 2 parts like this. So now, how do we write this integral? We could say this integral could be written as minus into integration of 1 over y minus 1 over y plus 1. We need to integrate this with respect to y. On the right side, we've got minus. So x is from minus 1. We could put this minus outside, and inside that leaves us with minus 1 over x. Okay, because x power minus 1, that's 1 over x, and we have plus c here. And now we just need to integrate this separately. Okay. Okay, yeah, let me come back to you in a moment. So this is negative sign. You could basically multiply the negative sign inside if you wanted, or keep it outside. That's your choice. If you keep it outside, how do you integrate these two things? What's the integration of 1 over y? This is just going to be ln of y. What's the integration of 1 over y plus 1? You can use ln rule here as well. What's the derivative of y plus 1? It's 1. You've got 1 in the numerator already. 1 over y plus 1, integration of that would be ln of y plus 1, right? Because it's the ln form as well. Derivative of the denominator is there in the numerator. So it becomes, integration becomes ln of y plus 1. On the other side, you've got minus 1 over x plus c. Now that's the final integration that you've got. Minus ln y plus ln of y plus 1. This equals minus 1 over x plus c. And now what you can do is you can find the value of c using the values that are given. They've given that x equals 1 when y equals 1. Let's input that here to find the value of c. Put x equals 1 and y equals 1, and that gives you minus ln of 1 plus ln of 1 plus 1. That equals minus 1 over 1 plus c, and that will give you the value for c. ln 1 is 0 plus ln 2, that equals minus 1 plus c, and the value of c turns out to be 1 plus ln 2. That's the value of c that we get. Now we put that back in that function, and it becomes minus ln y plus ln of y plus 1, that equals minus 1 over x plus 1 plus ln of 2. Now so we've got the solution now. How do we use the ln rule? Well, both of these fractions are standard ln rule fractions. Derivative of y is 1, so that's just ln y. Derivative of y plus 1 is 1, so that's just ln of y plus 1. We've just applied the ln rule. We've got this. Numerator is the derivative of the denominator, so it becomes, the integration of that becomes ln of the denominator. These both fractions are like that, right? You got the derivative of the denominator in the numerator. We're just applying ln rule on each one of them separately. Okay. Now we've got this. What we need to do after this point is we need to obtain y in terms of x. So y needs to be the subject. Now, how do you make y the subject? You've got y inside ln. So you need to get rid of ln somehow. Okay, how do you do that? You can bring this ln to the left side as well. So it becomes ln of y plus 1 minus ln of y minus ln of 2, that equals 1 minus 1 over x on the right side. So these are the two terms that I'm keeping on the right side. I'm bringing ln 2 on the left side. So this is what we end up getting from that. Now make it a single ln term. You can be applying the multiplication law and the division law of logs, and that's going to become y plus 1 into y plus 1 divided by y, and also this 2. So whichever terms have a positive sign, they remain in the numerator. Whichever terms have a negative sign, they go to the denominator. So in the denominator, we've got 2y like this. This is what we get. And now, how do we obtain c? By inputting the values here. These were the values of x and y. X equals 1 and y equals 1. We just input those values there, and that gave us the value of c. Okay. Now we need to make y the subject. How can we do that? We can take this ln to the other side. It will become the base of e. What does that give us? Y plus 1 over 2y, that equals e raised to power 1 minus 1 over x, which is kind of weird, but that's what we have. And now we need to make y the subject. How do we do that? We can multiply this 2y on the other side. Let's do it on the side now. Then 2y goes to the other side. It gets multiplied like this. E raised to power 1 minus 1 over x. Now take y terms to one side, everything else to the other side. And it would become 1 equal to 2y e raised to power 1 minus 1 over x minus y. Let's take y common. If we take y common, that leaves us with 2e raised to power 1 minus 1 over x minus 1. And that equals 1. And y finally turns out to be 1 over 2e raised to power 1 minus 1 over x minus 1. This is what we're getting for y in terms of x. All right. Now, let me go through this again. So answering the questions that you're asking about. So why are we using the partial fractions rule? Okay, so why are we using the partial fractions rule? Well, this is the fraction that we had. This was the fraction 1 over y squared plus y. It's a fraction. How can we integrate fractions? ln rule. Can we have the numerator as the derivative of the denominator? We can't in this case because the derivative of the denominator is 2y plus 1. We can't have 2y plus 1 in the numerator. ln rule does not work. Can we use tan inverse rule? Well, we can't because the denominator is not in that form. So one of the other rules that we think of is partial fractions. Partial fractions works when the denominator can be factorized in some way. Can we factorize the denominator? In this case, we have y squared plus y. Y squared plus y can be factorized, right? It can be written as y into y plus 1. Since it can be factorized, we can do partial fractions for this. So we get two fractions, one with denominator y and the other with denominator y plus 1. Right? So whenever we can factorize the denominator, we think of doing partial fractions in that case. And it's a proper fraction, so we don't have to do division before that. We just do partial fractions like this. Does that make sense, Ruqayya? Abdullah, Mustafa and Sabur, were your questions answered as well? Mustafa and Sabur, did you understand? Who's Sabur, by the way? Okay, all right. So this is what we end up getting. Y equals 1 over 2 e raised to power 1 minus 1 over x minus 1. Okay, that's y in terms of x that we get. Now it says, state what happens to the value of y when x tends to infinity. Now let's think about that. We have y equals 1 over 2 e raised to power 1 minus 1 over x minus 1. This is what we've got, y in terms of x. Now, what happens when x goes towards infinity? Let's think about this. That means x becomes very large. Now, one way to do this is input a very large value in your calculator in this function. So in place of x, put a large value. Try this on your calculator. For example, replace x with maybe, since it's in power, but there's a fraction as well. Yeah, so try a large value. So maybe 9999 in place of x and see what your calculator gives you. Okay, you can't do that, in fact, because they want the answer in exact form. So that is not going to work. Otherwise, generally, you can input this in your calculator and that works, but they want exact form. Since they want exact form, we'll have to think of it logically. So how do we think of it logically? Where is x? X is only in this part. Okay, so let's break it down. As x goes towards infinity, what happens to 1 over x? When denominator becomes very large, what happens to this fraction? This fraction is going to go towards 0. So 1 over x will become 0. So what happens to this fraction then? It becomes 1 over 2e raised to power 1 minus 0 minus 1. So what's 1 minus 0? That's just 1. So this gives you y equal to 1 over 2e minus 1. This is the exact value of y that you get from this. It says dy over dx equals this. It is given that y equals 0 when x equals 0. We need to solve this differential equation and find the value of y when x equals 1 over 2. Let's solve this differential equation. So how do we solve differential equation? The first thing we have to do is we have to separate the variables. Okay, let's separate the variables. Y terms को एक side पे ले जाएं, x terms को एक side पे रखें. E raised to power 3y, I can take that to the other side. And that will give me e raised to power minus 3y dy. और right side में मेरे पास क्या बचेगा फिर? Sin square 2x dx. All right, so I've separated the variables. So once we have separated the variables, we can just integrate both sides separately. Left side को भी integrate कर दें और right side को भी integrate कर दें. जब आप separate कर लेंगे, इसका एक मार्क आपको इस point पे मिल जाएगा. फिर आप integrate करना है. Left side को integrate करें. E raised to power minus 3y का integral with respect to y. E power something का integral e power that वही होता है. So it remains e raised to power minus 3y. But we have to divide by the derivative of this thing. Minus 3y का derivative minus 3 से हम divide करेंगे. ठीक है? That's what we get on the left side. Now, what about sin square 2x? Sin square की integration कैसे होती है? You have to remember that sin square की integration के लिए हमें trigonometry use करनी पड़ती है. Trigonometry में, in particular, we have to use the identity for cos, the double angle identity for cos. Remember what that used to be? जब sin square आता है right side के ऊपर. One form of the double angle identity for cos is this. Cos 2a is identical to 1 minus 2 sin square a. आपको ये वाली आइडेंटिटी यूज करनी होती है साइन स्क्वायर को इंटीग्रेट करने के लिए. कॉस स्क्वायर को भी यही कॉस की डबल एंगल आइडेंटिटी यूज करके ही इंटीग्रेट करते हैं. Now cos 2a is equal to this. अगर हम इसमें से sin square a को सब्जेक्ट बनाएं तो उससे हमें क्या मिलेगा? sin square a अगर सब्जेक्ट बन जाए, ये होगा 2 sin square a equals 1 minus cos 2a. Then we can divide 2 on the other side. That will leave us with sin square a equals 1 over 2 minus cos 2a over 2. All right. अब यहाँ पे देखें 2x है, तो अगर a की जगह पे मैं 2a कर दूं, यहाँ पे देखें एंगल जो भी लेफ्ट पर एंगल है राइट साइड पे उसका डबल एंगल आ रहा है मेरे पास इधर. तो अगर मैं a की जगह पे 2a कर देता हूँ यहाँ पे, तो राइट साइड पे क्या आ जाएगा? राइट साइड पे मेरे पास आ जाएगा 1 over 2 minus cos of 4a over 2. तो जो ये 2a था उसका डबल क्या हो जाएगा? 4a. राइट साइड पे 4a आ जाएगा. सो इसको इंटीग्रेट करने के लिए मुझे क्या करना पड़ेगा? sin square 2x को I'll have to write it as 1 over 2 minus 1 over 2 into cos of 4a. इस तरह लिखना पड़ेगा. a की जगह में in fact I have to write x here. This is what this form can be converted to. जब आप ये conversion कर लेंगे, the rest is pretty straightforward after that. ये देख लें कन्वर्जन होगी तो इसको मैंने 1 over 2 को मैंने साइड पे लिख दिया, ये वाले 2 को, and then you have cos of 4x. Okay. Now you can integrate the right hand side. Left side पे तो मेरे पास ये आ रहा है minus e raised to power minus 3y over 3. Right side पे what is the integration of 1 over 2 with respect to x? That's 1 over 2 times x. And then minus 1 over 2, this constant remains as it is. Cos 4x की integration क्या हो जाएगी? Cos का integral क्या होता है? Sine. So it becomes sine of 4x whole divided by 4. Okay, 4x से derivative से आपको divide भी करना पड़ेगा. This is the integral that you get on the right side. But remember, we also have a plus c. एक side पे आपको plus c भी लगा देना है. किसी भी एक side पे लगा देना. Okay, so this is what the solution of the differential equation turns out to be. अब आपको क्या करना है? C की value figure out करनी है. You have to input y equal to 0 and x equal to 0. Let's do that. So we input x equals 0 and y equals 0. Let's do that. X equals 0, y 0 input करते हैं इसके अंदर. Okay, we have more space. Okay, so e raised to power 0 over 3 minus p, remember, minus e raised to power 0 over 3. On the other side, we have half into 0, that's 0, minus 1 over 2 into sine of 0 divided by 4 plus c. Sine 0 to 0 ho jata hai, so we get c equal to minus 1 over 3. C की value आ गई. Now the differential equation that we have becomes minus e raised to power minus 3y divided by 3, that equals 1 over 2x minus 1 over 2. In fact, ये 2 और 4 ये 8 हो जाएगा. इसको हम 8 लिख लेते हैं. Let's say this is sine 4x over 8 plus c की वैल्यू क्या आ गई? minus 1 over 3. ये आपके पास डिफरेंशियल इक्वेशन का सोल्यूशन आ गया जिसमें आपने c की वैल्यू पे फिगर आउट कर ली. ठीक है, अब उसने क्वेश्चन में क्या कहा हुआ है? उसने हमें क्वेश्चन में कोई भी स्पेसिफिक फॉर्म नहीं मांगी हुई. उसने कहा बस सॉल्व द डिफरेंशियल इक्वेशन. You don't have to make any particular variable the subject. You can just keep it like this and that's okay. उसने कहा है find the value of y when x equals 1 over 2. आप डायरेक्टली क्या करें? x की वैल्यू इनपुट कर दें इसके अंदर 1 over 2. That's what we're looking for. Let's input x equals 1 over 2. जब ये इनपुट करेंगे तो उस पर देख लें आपकी corresponding value for y क्या आती है. एग्जैक्ट चाहिए हमें या क्या यहाँ पे? नहीं, एग्जैक्ट नहीं चाहिए तो डेसिमल्स में भी इट शुड बी फाइन. अगर आपकी डेसिमल्स में आ रही है तो दैट्स ओके. अच्छा, minus e raised to power minus 3y over 3, that's what we have on the left side. On the right side, we get 1 over 2 into 1 over 2 minus sine of 4x. That means 4 into 1 over 2, वो क्या हो जाएगा? 4 over 2, right? So sine of 2 हो जाएगा essentially, divided by 8 minus 1 over 3. ठीक है. Now let's simplify this and see what we get from this. Left side पे हमारे पास ये आ रहा है minus e raised to power minus 3y divided by 3. This becomes 1 over 4 on the right side minus sine of 2 over 8 minus 1 over 3. अब right side को evaluate कर लें, decimals में लिख लें, देखें आपके पास क्या आता है. And that's okay. आपको exact answer तो नहीं चाहिए. तो ये decimals में देखते हैं हमारे पास क्या value आती है right side के ऊपर. Remember, your calculator has to be in gradient mode. 1 over 4 minus sine of 2 divided by 8 minus 1 over 3. Right side pe I'm getting minus 0.19699. Essentially वो round off करके ना 99 उसके बाद 5 आ रहा है तो ये बन जाएगा 1970. Okay, minus minus खत्म कर दें. You have e raised to power minus 3y equal to 3 into this. 3 से multiply करें इसको. This gives me 0.59099. Okay, now we need to find the value for y. क्या करें? दोनों sides पे log ले लें. पावर में आ रहा है ना y, तो ln लेना पड़ेगा दोनों साइड्स पे. ln e raised to power minus 3y, that equals ln of 0.59099 minus 3y नीचे आ जाएगा. minus 3y equals ln of 0.59099 अब ये -3 वहां पे जाके डिवाइड कर दें and see what you get from that. कैलकुलेटर में डाल दें सीधा। आंसर जो आ रहा था आपके पास उसको आप पॉजिटिव कर दें पहले तो। टेक ln of that and divide that by -3, and that is giving me 0.175. That's the value of y that we were looking for. Question number 7 says the variables x and theta satisfy this differential equation for theta between 0 and 𝗫/2. And x is greater than 0. It's given that x equals 2 when theta equals 𝗫/4. We need to show that derivative d over d theta of cot square theta is equal to -2 cot theta over sine square theta. And they've given that you can assume without proof that the derivative of cot theta with respect to theta is minus cosecant square theta. उसने cot का derivative बता दिया और उसने कहा cot square theta का derivative निकालो. Let's do that. We need to find the derivative of cot square theta. How do we do that? Cot square theta को आप power form में लिख सकते हो. Cot square theta का मतलब है essentially it's cot theta का whole square, right? That's cot square theta is the short form of this thing. ठीक है? अब इसको आप ये नहीं सोचोगे कि आपको cot का डेरिवेटिव नहीं पता तो इसको पहले tan में कन्वर्ट कर लो. वो करने की जरूरत नहीं है. उसने आपको cot का डेरिवेटिव इसलिए आपको बता दिया कि आपको tan में कन्वर्ट करने की इसको जरूरत नहीं है. अगर वो नहीं बताया होता तो फिर आप tan में कन्वर्ट करते इसको. लेकिन उसने बताया हुआ है यहाँ पे cot का डेरिवेटिव. इसका मतलब ये आप इस पर डायरेक्टली अगर पावर रूल अप्लाई कर दो, how is that going to work? You will multiply by the power, so you have 2 multiplied and we have cot theta की power reduced to 1, power में से 1 minus कर दिया, so cot theta रह गया सिर्फ. Then you have to multiply with the derivative of cot theta, जो उसके अंदर वाला part होता है, base of the power, उसके derivative से आपको multiply करना है. What's the derivative of cot theta? They've given us here, that is minus cosecant square theta. You'll multiply by that. Okay, so this is what the derivative of cot square theta turns out to be. It's minus 2 cot theta into cosecant square theta. This is just a 1 mark question, so you can just leave it at this point. You don't have to do anything further than this. आप इसको as it is जो है वो छोड़ सकते हैं. Okay, अच्छा नहीं sorry, उसने प्रूव करने के लिए कहा है. I've missed that. उसने ये प्रूव करने के लिए कहा है तो आप उसको क्या करेंगे? कोसेकेंट स्क्वायर थीटा, तो उसको अगर आप डिनोमिनेटर में ले जाएंगे वो साइन स्क्वायर हो जाएगा. उसने प्रूव करने के लिए कहा हुआ था तो इसलिए आपको वो करना पड़ेगा. सो इट बिकम्स 2 cot theta डिवाइडेड बाय साइन स्क्वायर थीटा. सो यू डू हैव टू डू दिस लास्ट स्टेप. अगर उसने सिर्फ फाइंड करने के लिए कहा होता, यू कुड लीव इट एट दिस पॉइंट एंड दैट वुड हैव बीन ओके. All right, चलिए आपने प्रूव कर दिया. Let's move on to the next one. Now it says solve this differential equation and find the value of x when theta is equal to 𝗫/6. So now we need to solve this differential equation. Which differential equation? This scary looking differential equation. How can we do that? Let's figure this out. So we have x sine square theta into dx over d theta, that is equal to tan square theta minus 2 cot theta. Okay, this is the equation that we have. We need to solve this differential equation and find the value of x when theta equals 𝗫/6. Okay, so how do we start with this? सबसे पहले आप क्या करते हो differential equation को solve करने के लिए? You have to separate the variables. So that's how we start. Okay, let's separate the variables first of all. You have theta terms on the right side. d theta नीचे है, इसको right पे लेके जाएंगे, right side पे d theta आ जाएगा. So you have to convert everything to, you have to take all the theta terms to the right side and keep the x terms on the left side, right? अब लेफ्ट साइड पे आपके पास क्या हो जाएगा? आपके पास बचेगा x into dx. On the right side, if we take sine square to the other side, that is going to leave you with tan square theta over sine square theta minus 2 cot theta divided by sine square theta. All right, and you have d theta multiplied with that by आपके पास d theta आ रहा होगा. अब क्या करें? अब हमें इसको इंटीग्रेट करना है. We have separated the variables. एक मार्क आपको इसका मिल जाता है सेपरेट करने का. And now you have to think about how to integrate it. How to integrate the left hand side and the right hand side. Now, how do we think about this? अब देखें उसने फर्स्ट पार्ट में आपसे ये क्यों निकलवाया है. आपको वो सोचना है कि is that relevant to this in any way? You have minus 2 cot theta over sine square theta here, and that's exactly what you have in one of these terms here. Minus 2 cot theta over sine square theta. तो बेसिकली इसकी इंटीग्रेशन आपको डायरेक्टली पता है. जो आपके पास ये टर्म आ रही है, we already know the integral of this thing is going to be cot square theta. So ये आपको evaluate करने की जरूरत नहीं है. You already know this. आपको सिर्फ क्या करना है, ये फर्स्ट वाला इंटीग्रल evaluate करना है. ठीक है? So let's do this. लेफ्ट साइड पर आपके पास x है, with respect to x, let's integrate that. वो आपके पास simply क्या आ जाएगा, x square over 2 आ जाएगा. राइट साइड पे you have first of all tan square over sin square. ये खुद से इंटीग्रेट करना है. You need to think about this. इसको क्या कर सकते हैं? It's a fraction. इस पे fractions वाले कोई भी rules नहीं apply होते. But one idea you can use here is you can say tan is the same as sin over cos. Right? So tan की जगह पे क्या लिख सकते हो? आप इसको कह सकते हो this is sin square theta over cos square theta divided by sin square theta. Right? And दूसरा जो इंटीग्रल है उसका आप अलग से रखें. इसमें आपके पास क्या चाहिए, माइनस आपको अंदर चाहिए इंटीग्रल के, तो दूसरे इंटीग्रल में आप क्या कर सकते हो, आप यहाँ पे लिखो प्लस बाहर और फिर आप अंदर लिख दो माइनस 2 cot थीटा ओवर साइन स्क्वायर थीटा डी थीटा. ये आपने इन दोनों इंटीग्रल्स को क्या कर लिया, सेपरेट कर लिया इस तरह से. ठीक है, अब इनको अलग अलग इवैल्यूएट कर लें. ये इंटीग्रल तो हमें पता है क्या होता है, ऊपर से देख लिख लेंगे. फर्स्ट इंटीग्रल में क्या हो रहा है, sin square and sin square get cancelled and we are just left with 1 over cos square theta. Right? इसकी इंटीग्रेशन हमें ऊपर पता है ये क्या होनी चाहिए, cot square theta. इसको हम cot square में कन्वर्ट कर लेते हैं डायरेक्टली. This is the only thing that you're left with now. 1 over cos square को इंटीग्रेट करना है. How can we do that? Let's think about this now. 1 over cos square की integration. Again, none of the rules for fractions are going to apply to this. तो हम क्या करेंगे, cos square को उठा के ऊपर ले जाएंगे. cos square को ऊपर लेके जाते हैं तो क्या होता है, remember cos किसका reciprocal होता है, cos is the reciprocal of secant. So in the numerator you could get secant square theta like this. And secant square is something जिसका integral आपको directly पता होता है. Right? Secant square integral होता है tan का. Tan का derivative is secant square, right? So secant square का integral क्या आएगा? That's going to be tan. So you have tan theta plus cot square theta plus c here like this. Make sense? ये आपके पास ये डिफरेंशियल इक्वेशन सॉल्व होगी, बट आपको c की वैल्यू फिगर आउट करनी है. c की वैल्यू फिगर आउट करनी है, फिर आपने x की वैल्यू निकालनी है जब थीटा पाई ओवर 6 है. Now how do you find the value of c? Let's think about that. Are we given a point? Yes, it says x equals 2 when theta equals pi over 4. इसमें कुछ और भी information यहाँ पे दी है, it might be handy later. Theta is between 0 and pi over 2 and x is greater than 0. उसने एक point दिया हुआ है, when x is equal to 2, theta is pi over 4. We're going to use this point to find the value for c. x2 and theta pi over 4. Let's put that here. We say let's input x equal to 2 and theta equal to pi over 4 and see what that gives us. अच्छा, let's get back to this. So x equals 2 और pi over 4 यहाँ पे input किया, देखें हमारे पास क्या आता है. We have 2 squared over 2 equals tan theta. So that's tan of pi over 4 plus cot square theta. अब ये तो हम कैलकुलेटर में नहीं डाल सकते, राइट? cot square का तो कोई बटन नहीं होता कैलकुलेटर में, तो क्या करना पड़ेगा, इसको 1 over tan करना पड़ेगा. So we can say this is 1 over tan square theta. So we can say 1 over tan pi over 4 का whole square, right? ये कैलकुलेटर में डाल देंगे. इनफैक्ट हमें एग्जैक्ट चाहिए होगा तो उसको हम वर्किंग भी शो करेंगे. ये देखते हैं इसको क्या करना है. 2 square over 2 on the left side, that's going to give us 2. Tan of pi over 4, pi over 4 is 45 degrees, right? Tan pi over 4 आपके पास 1 आ जाएगा. कैलकुलेटर में डाल के देख लें, 1 आ जाएगा. You have 1 plus 1 over 1 plus c. Okay, and that gives you c equals 0. Interestingly, so the value of c turns out to be 0. All right, c की वैल्यू 0 आ गई. अब हम क्या करें, इसमें वापस इनपुट करते हैं x square over 2, that equals tan theta plus tan theta plus cot square theta plus 0. ठीक है, ये हमारे पास इक्वेशन आ गई. ऑल राइट, अब क्या करें. अब हमें उसने एक स्पेसिफिक पॉइंट पे कहा है कि आपको थीटा फाइंड करना है. किस पॉइंट के ऊपर? मैं थीटा x फाइंड करना है. When the value of theta is pi over 6. थीटा की जगह पे pi over 6 डाल दें और देखें x की वैल्यू क्या आती है आपके पास से. We put theta equals pi over 6. Let's see what we get from this. We have x square over 2 equals tan of pi over 6 plus 1 over tan square. So that's 1 over tan pi over 6 का whole square. ठीक है, इसको evaluate कर लेंगे. देखें हमारे पास क्या आता है. उसने exact तो नहीं मांगा, उसने एग्जैक्ट नहीं कहा. इसको डेसिमल्स में कन्वर्ट कर सकते हैं, पूरा का पूरा आप कैलकुलेटर में डाल दें और देखिए आपके पास राइट साइड पे क्या आता है. लेट मी ट्राई दैट. मेक श्योर योर कैलकुलेटर इज इन रेडियन मोड. So tan of pi divided by 4 plus 1 divided by tan, pi over 6 था, एक और केयरलेस हो जाना था. 1 divided by tan of pi over 6 and then whole square of this. I'll just put that whole thing on my calculator and let's see what we get from this. This is giving me 3.57735 on the right side. 2 से multiply कर दें and that's going to give you something that is 7.155. Take square root and that gives you plus minus 2.6748. So that's just 5. Okay, ये दो आंसर्स आ रहे हैं. बट जब मल्टीपल आंसर्स आ रहे हैं तो आपको केयरफुल रहना है कि क्या ये दोनों पॉसिबल है या कोई ऐसा केस है जो नहीं पॉसिबल. वापस आते हैं, क्वेश्चन में उसने क्या दिया है. उसने कहा हुआ है x is supposed to be greater than 0. Now if x is greater than 0, that means we only have to consider the positive answer here, not the negative one. Okay, ये हमने सिर्फ positive answer consider करना है, negative नहीं consider करना. So the value of x therefore turns out to be 2.675. इसमें उसने क्वेश्चन के अंदर कोई इंस्ट्रक्शन नहीं दिया, कोई भी नंबर डेसिमल प्लेसेस या सिग्निफिकेंट फिगर्स की, तो इसको कुछ करने की जरूरत नहीं है. You can just leave your answer like this and that's going to be acceptable. 8 from this paper. It says at time t days after the start of observations, the number of insects in a population is n. The variation in the number of insects is modeled by a differential equation of the form dn over dt equals this thing, where k is a constant and n is a continuous variable. It's given that t equals 0 when n equals 100. We need to solve this differential equation, obtaining a relation between n, k, and t. Okay, so let's solve this differential equation. dn over dt equals kn raised to power 3 over 2 into cos of 0.02 times t. Okay, this is the equation that we have. Now, how do we start with this? How do we start solving this equation? We first have to separate the variables. Okay, t टर्म्स राइट पे रहने देंगे, n टर्म्स को लेफ्ट पे लाएंगे. इस n को अगर हम लेफ्ट पे लेकर आए तो ये क्या बन जाएगा, n raised to power -3/2. डिनोमिनेटर में होगा, उसको ऊपर लेके आएंगे तो पावर नेगेटिव हो जाएगी, राइट? सो -3/2 into dn. On the other side, you have k times cos of 0.02 times t into dt. So you have separated the variables. Once the variables are separated, you integrate both sides. Now, what's the integral of n raised to power -3/2? You add 1 to the power. It becomes n raised to power -1/2. -3/2 plus 1, that's -1/2. You divide by this increased power. -1/2 is आपने divide by कर दिया. On the other side, you have k as a constant into cos of 0.02t. Cos की integration क्या होती है? Sine, so it becomes sine of 0.02t divided by the derivative of this part. Sine 0.02t का derivative क्या होता है? 0.02. We divide by that plus c, and that is the differential. That's the solution of the differential equation that you get, but you also have to find the value of c here. That is what we're going to be doing next. But before that, let's simplify this a bit. -1/2, it's going to go to the numerator. 2 पर जाएगा तो ये क्या बन जाएगा? -2n raised to power -1/2. Now this is 0.02 in the denominator. We can also take this to the numerator. We can think of it like this. कि आपके पास ऐसा लिखा हुआ है 1/0.02 into k into sine of 0.02t. Right? You could think of it like this. 1/0.02 साइड पे लिखा हुआ है और फिर बाकी ये है. तो इससे फायदा क्या होगा? सिर्फ थोड़ा सा सिंप्लीफाई कर सकते हैं. 1/0.02 इवैल्यूएट कर लें. ये क्या होता है? ये आप कैलकुलेटर पे करेंगे. This is going to give you 50, I think. Or yeah, 50 आपको मिलेगा. Let me try that. 1 divided by 0.02. That is giving me 50. Yeah. 50 आ गया. So 0.02 यहाँ से डिनोमिनेटर से खत्म हुआ. ऊपर आपके पास क्या बचा? 50 into k into sine of 0.02t plus c. Now let's find the value of c. For that, we have some information given. It says t equals 0 when n equals 100. When t equals 0, n equals 100. Let's put that value here, put that point here. T equals 0 and n equals 100. And let's see what we get from that. -2 into 100 raised to power -1/2 equals 50k into sine of 0.02 into 0. That's just going to be 0 plus c. -2 into 100 raised to power -1/2 इस पूरे को आप कैलकुलेटर में डाल दें. वैसे ये होगा -2/10, I think. Yeah, we have to just not take the risk and put this whole thing on the calculator. That's giving me -1/5. Okay, so we have -1/5 on the right. On the left side, this term becomes 0 because sine 0 0 होता है. ये पूरी term 0 हो जाएगी. C की value आपके पास -1/5 आ गई. And now this equation turns out to be -2n raised to power -1/2 equals 50k into sine of 0.02t plus c की जगह आप लिख देंगे -1/5. That's the equation that we end up getting from this. Okay. उसने कहा था solve the differential equation obtaining a relation between n, k and t. We are done with that. उसने कोई specific form नहीं मांगी हमसे. We could leave it like this if we wanted. कुछ करने की जरूरत नहीं है. This is just fine. Okay, इस तरह आप छोड़ सकते हैं. If you wanted, you could also convert it to another form, and that's also okay. All right. Yes, Heather. You only need to put this on any one of the two sides. Although, yes, your point is logical. दोनों sides पर integrate करें, दोनों side पे c होना चाहिए. But think about it. Left side पर अगर हम c1 डाल देते हैं और left side पे c2 डाल देते हैं, तो c1 को right side पे लेके जाएंगे, तो वो हो जाएगा c2 minus c1. And that's just another constant. c2 minus c1, one constant minus another constant, that's another constant, right? तो आपको दोनों साइड्स पे लिखने की जरूरत नहीं होती. आप किसी भी एक साइड पे c डाल देते हैं. You can put that on the right side or the left side. किसी भी एक साइड पे डाल देते हैं. Okay? So generally हम right पे डाल देते हैं, but आप left पे डाल सकते हैं. उससे सिर्फ फर्क क्या पड़ेगा? यहाँ पे c की वैल्यू मेरी -1/5 आई है. अगर आप left पे डाल देते तो वो +1/5 आ जाती. The end result would be the same. Okay? Acha, that was the first part. Let's move on to the next one. In the next part, it says, given also that n equals 625, when t equals 50, find the value of k. All right, so this is the relation that we're getting. Let me copy this here. ये हमारे पास रिजल्ट आया था पिछले पार्ट से. ओके, अब हम क्या करेंगे, ये वैल्यूज इनपुट कर दें इसके अंदर. n is 625, so it gives you -2 into 625 power -1/2. On the other side, you have 50 into k into sine of 0.02 times 50. Right? तो आप input कर दें, देखें क्या आता है, 0.02 into 50. I think that's going to give me 1. Yeah, so that's 1. So it becomes sine of 1 minus 1/5. यहाँ से आप k evaluate कर लें. Right? Just put this whole thing on your calculator and see what you get. So basically, left side evaluate करें, -2 into, उसने exact value नहीं मांगी ना, तो calculator में पूरा डाल सकते हैं. That's okay. -2 into 625 whole raised to power -0.5. That's the left hand side. अब ये 1/5 उधर जाएगा, plus 1/5 हो जाएगा. ठीक है, so add 1/5 to this, and then this 50 gets divided. 50 over sine 1 वो जाके divide हो जाएगा वहाँ पे. So divided by 50 and also divided by sine of 1, keeping in mind your calculator should be in radian mode. Okay, that's very important. यहाँ से आपके पास k की वैल्यू आ जाएगी. ओके, ये आप देख लें आपके पास क्या आती है. I'm getting 2.85 into 10 raised to power -3. इसको डेसिमल्स में लिखते हैं तो क्या होएगा, 0.0285. This is the value of k that I'm getting. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Walaikum assalam. Then let's look at the next one. The next one says obtain an expression for n in terms of t. Okay, now let's do that. So we already have this form. अब उसने कहा है कि n को आपने सब्जेक्ट बनाना है, और उसके लिए उसने आपसे k की वैल्यू भी निकलवा ली है पहले. तो k की वैल्यू इसमें इनपुट कर देते हैं. Let's input the value of k here first of all, and then simplify this. So the value of k that we have is 0.00285. 0.00285. We input that here, and now we make n the subject. N subject कैसे बनेगा? Let's think about that. अच्छा, let's simplify this first of all. इस 2 को जाके ना मैं right side पे divide कर रहा हूँ. ठीक है, 2 को जाके right side पे divide कर लेते हैं. That gives me n over n raised to power -1/2. That equals, if I divide 2 on the other side as well and simplify everything there, let's see what we get from that. 50 into 0.00285 divided by -2. That gives me -0.07125 into sine of 0.02t. -2 gets divided by this as well. So 1 divided by 5 divided by 2, that's going to give us 1/10, और वो positive भी हो जाएगा. So we have plus 1/10 here. We need n in terms of t. अब n को subject बनाना है. n को subject कैसे बनाए? Power यहाँ पे -1/2 है, right? Even if we were to square this, ये -1 होगी, हमें +1 चाहिए. ठीक है, तो हम क्या कर सकते हैं, हम इसको पहले तो ऐसे कर सकते हैं, रेसिप्रोकल ले लें. राइट, रेसिप्रोकल लेंगे दोनों साइड्स के ऊपर, तो आपके पास लेफ्ट साइड को इनफैक्ट मैं ऐसे लिख लेता हूँ पहले, 1 over n raised to power 1/2. Now before you take reciprocal, in fact remember you can't take reciprocals of individual terms. आपको पहले क्या करना पड़ेगा, इसका LCM लेना पड़ेगा. राइट साइड पे हम LCM ले लेते हैं पहले. राइट साइड पे LCM लेते हैं, आपके पास क्या आता है, 10 से मल्टीप्लाई होगा, and that is going to give you -0.7125 into sine of 0.02t plus 1 whole divided by 10. ठीक है, अब इसका रेसिप्रोकल लेंगे तो आपके पास क्या आ जाएगा, n raised to power 1/2 that equals minus, no in fact 10 over minus 0.7125 into sine of 0.02t plus 1. Okay, that's the equation that we get. अब n की पावर 1/2 है, आपको n चाहिए, दोनों साइड्स पे स्क्वायर कर लें, दोनों साइड्स पे स्क्वायर करेंगे तो क्या होगा, लेफ्ट साइड से आपका स्क्वायर रूट रिमूव हो जाएगा और राइट साइड पे आपके पास इस तरह से होल स्क्वायर आ जाएगा. This is n in terms of t that we were looking for. Okay, and it turns out this is only going to get you 1 mark at this until this point. Okay, तो यहां तक आपको सिर्फ 1 मार्क हुआ है अभी. इसके बाद वो कहता है find the greatest value of n predicted by this model. How do we do this now? The greatest value of n predicted by this model. Okay, अब देखें मैक्सिमम वैल्यू ऑफ n फाइंड करनी है. इसका एक तरीका तो ये हो सकता है कि आप क्या करें, ऊपर आपके पास डेरिवेटिव है, डेरिवेटिव को हम 0 इनपुट कर दें, उससे आपके पास ये राइट साइड पे ये पूरी चीज 0 से इक्वल हो जाएगी. You'll get cos into 0.02t equals 0 from that, क्योंकि n 0 नहीं हो सकता, k 0 नहीं हो सकता, तो ये 0 हो जाएगा. इससे आपके पास t की कोई वैल्यू आएगी, जो t की वैल्यू आएगी, इनफैक्ट मल्टीपल वैल्यूज आ सकती हैं, उनको आपको यहाँ पे इनपुट करना पड़ेगा, चेक करना पड़ेगा, जिससे आपकी छोटी वैल्यू आती है, दैट्स गोइंग टू बी जो जिससे आपको बड़ी वैल्यू मिलती है, दैट्स गोइंग टू बी द ग्रेटेस्ट पॉसिबल वैल्यू ऑफ n. कि आप डेरिवेटिव को 0 से इक्वेट करें, that's one possible method, right? डेरिवेटिव को 0 से इक्वेट किया, जो रिजल्ट आया t की जो वैल्यू आएगी उसको n में इनपुट कर दें. That's one possibility. Okay, but this is going to be pretty long. We could also think of it another way, because यहाँ पे देखें n किसके ऊपर डिपेंड कर रहा है, n डिपेंड कर रहा है t के ऊपर. t इधर आ रहा है डिनोमिनेटर में, और डिनोमिनेटर में कहां पर आ रहा है, सिर्फ साइन के अंदर आ रहा है. साइन के अंदर आपके पास, साइन फंक्शन के अंदर आपके पास t आ रहा है. Now all we have to do is just consider the extreme values of this sine function. Sine की extreme values आपके पास क्या क्या हो सकते हैं. Sine, remember, is between -1 and 1, right? -1 और 1 के दरम्यान में होता है. तो आपको क्या करना है, एक दफा इस चीज को आप क्या करें, इसको आप 1 से इक्वेट कर दें. That's one extreme value. एक दफा इसको क्या करें, -1 से इक्वेट कर दें, और आप देखें दोनों पे आपको n की क्या वैल्यू मिलती है. ओके, रिमेंबर साइन का जो रिजल्ट होता है वो -1 और 1 के दरम्यान में होता है ना. तो आप एक्सट्रीम पॉइंट्स पे चेक करें, क्योंकि उससे आपको n की एक्सट्रीम वैल्यूज बनेगी. तो आपने एक दफा क्या करना है, साइन वाले पार्ट को -1 से इक्वेट कर देना, एक दफा साइन वाले पार्ट को +1 से इक्वेट कर देना, और उससे आपने देखना है आपको क्या मिलता है. ठीक है, नाउ लेट्स ट्राई दैट. साइन ऑफ 0.02t, इसकी जगह पे हम क्या करते हैं, 1 इनपुट करते हैं, इससे देखते हैं n की वैल्यू क्या आती है, और साइन ऑफ 0.02t की जगह पे हम -1 इनपुट कर देते हैं, उसकी जगह पे देखते हैं n की वैल्यू क्या आती है. दोनों n की वैल्यूज देख लें, जो बड़ी होगी दैट इज गोइंग टू बी योर ग्रेटेस्ट वैल्यू. ठीक है, ये आप कैलकुलेटर में डालें, आपको देखें क्या आता है. ओके, लेट मी ट्राई दैट. 10 divided by -0.7125 into 1 plus 1, and then whole squared. Okay, so when I input 1 in place of that, that is giving me n equal to 1209.8. Okay, this is one possibility. अब हमें नहीं पता ये सही है कि नहीं, हमें पहले दूसरे में जाके इनपुट करना पड़ेगा. ठीक है, पहले -1 इनपुट करना पड़ेगा, उससे देखना पड़ेगा उससे क्या आता है. So let me do that again. Okay, so for some reason it got removed from here, so I have to input that again. 10 divided by -0.7125 into -1 plus 1, and then whole squared. The second one is giving me 34.1. Okay, जो बड़ी value है, you would say this is the greatest n. This is the maximum possible value of n. आप decimal में लिख दें, that's also okay. लेकिन क्योंकि number of insects की बात हो रही है यहाँ पे, n represents the number of insects, right? Yeah. The number of insects तो integer होना चाहिए. You could also write it as 1210. दोनों तरह लिख सकते हैं. It's going to be acceptable because यहाँ पे n को कहा हुआ है कि n is continuous, तो उसका decimal में भी लिख सकते हैं और integer भी लिख सकते हैं. We are given that y equals ln of x. Log के अंदर एक और log है. Okay, that's what you want to differentiate. Log के अंदर एक और log आ रहा है, इसको हमें differentiate करना. Now, how do we do this? Remember, differentiation हम करते हैं, we start from the outermost function. We start from the outermost function. Now, what's the outermost function? ये हमारा बाहर वाला log है, इसको differentiate करते हैं. ln की integration क्या होती है? If you remember, ln की integration होती है 1 over x, है ना? अच्छा. So basically, अंदर जो भी आ रहा होगा वो denominator में चला जाएगा. So we say dy over dx is going to be 1 over this thing that is inside the brackets, that is ln of x. ठीक है? और फिर क्या करना होता है? ये जो अंदर आ रहा होता है ब्रैकेट के, उसके डेरिवेटिव से मल्टीप्लाई करना होता है. ln x का डेरिवेटिव क्या होएगा? ln x का डेरिवेटिव होता है 1 over x. So we multiply by 1 over x. And what do we get from that? We get 1 over x ln x. Now, this is a question in which you are required to show this derivative. उसने आंसर आपको बताया हुआ है already. So it's necessary to show it as two separate terms like this, separate expressions like this, and then multiply them. Otherwise, final answer तो आपको पास already पता है. तो इसको one line में सीधा आंसर नहीं लिखना, उसका मार्क नहीं मिलेगा आपको. You'll show them separately कि आपने पहले 1 over ln x किया है, फिर उसको multiply किया है 1 over x के साथ, and then that gives you 1 over x ln x. Okay, ये आपके पास derivative आ गया. Okay, let's look at the next part. Now, this is a differential equation. The variables x and t satisfy this differential equation. X ln x plus t dx over dt equals 0. It is given that x equals e when t equals 2. एक point आपको दिया हुआ है. We have to solve this differential equation, obtaining an expression for x in terms of t. X subject होना चाहिए, t के terms में आपका answer होना चाहिए. We have to simplify our expression as much as we can. Okay. Now, how do we solve differential equations? We have to first separate the variables. Variables को separate करना है. अब ये dx जहाँ पे numerator में आ रहा है, dx आपके पास left side पे numerator में है, left side पे सारी x terms रखेंगे और t terms को हम right side पे ले जाएंगे. ठीक है? Now, how do we separate the variables here? Let's think about this. अच्छा, पहले तो हम क्या कर सकते हैं? इस पूरी इक्वेशन को हम dt से मल्टीप्लाई कर सकते हैं, राइट? इसको dt से अगर मल्टीप्लाई कर दें तो हमारे पास उससे क्या होता है? We get x ln x dt plus t dx equals 0. अब dt को राइट साइड पे ले जाते हैं. What does that give us? That gives us t dx equals minus x ln x dt. ठीक है? This is what we are getting. Now, we can take the x terms to the left side, t terms to the right side. X ln x को left side के ऊपर ले आए. What does that give us? That gives us minus 1 over x ln x into dx, and that equals 1 over t dt. ये आपने variables को separate कर दिया. ठीक है? So that's the first thing that you start with when you're solving differential equations. x वाली terms एक side के ऊपर और एक variable एक side के ऊपर, दूसरा variable दूसरी side के ऊपर. That gets you 1 mark. Separating the variables always gets you 1 mark in differential equations, right? Okay, so that's what you start with. Separate कर लिया. Now you integrate both sides. Left side को integrate कर दिया, right side को integrate कर दिया. Of course, left side पे we've got dx, so इसको हम with respect to x integrate करेंगे. Right side पे we've got dt, इसको with respect to t integrate करेंगे. अच्छा, right side is relatively straightforward. Why? Because we just have 1 over t there. 1 over t का integral क्या होता है with respect to t? is going to be ln of t, right? That's pretty straightforward. यहीं पे हम कांस्टेंट भी लगा देते हैं साथ, राइट साइड तो हमारे पास होगी, ठीक है। Now what do we do with this integral 1 over x ln x? इसको हमने इंटीग्रेट करना है। Now if you think about it, we don't really have a direct method of doing this. फ्रैक्शन है, फ्रैक्शन में हम क्या करते होते थे नॉर्मली? कैन वी यूज द लॉग मेथड हियर? डिनोमिनेटर का डेरिवेटिव न्यूमरेटर में है, हमारे पास नहीं है, तो वो तो नहीं अप्लाई होता। टैन इनवर्स वाली फॉर्म है, वो भी नहीं है। पार्शियल फ्रैक्शंस के क्या करेंगे, उसका कोई खास फायदा नहीं होगा। सो व्हाट डू वी डू देन? एनी क्विक आइडियाज इन दिस? क्या करें? आपको डायरेक्टली तो इसको इंटीग्रेट करना नहीं आता इस फंक्शन को, बट इफ यू थिंक अबाउट इट, व्हाट हैव वी जस्ट डन इन द प्रीवियस पार्ट? उसने आपसे कोई चीज प्रूव करवाई है फर्स्ट पार्ट के अंदर। उसने क्या कराया है? उसने कहा है अगर आपके पास के फंक्शन हो ln of ln x, इसका जो डेरिवेटिव होता है दैट इज 1 over x ln x. Isn't that exactly what you're getting here? 1 over x ln x. तो बेसिकली इसको जब इंटीग्रेट करेंगे तो आपके पास ये चीज आ जाएगी वापस, ओके? तो इसको आपको खुद करने की जरूरत नहीं है। एग्जैक्टली दानियाल, सो दैट्स गुड। आपको करने की जरूरत नहीं है। फर्स्ट पार्ट को आपने डायरेक्टली यूज करना है, बस नेगेटिव साइन को बाहर लिख दें, बिकॉज ऊपर नेगेटिव नहीं था, तो माइनस को उठा के हम बाहर लिख देते हैं। लेट मी जस्ट डू इट इन दिस स्टेप। माइनस को बाहर लिख देते हैं। अब जो अंदर वाले पार्ट का इंटीग्रल है दैट इज माइनस ln of ln x. दैट्स द इंटीग्रेशन, ठीक है। अब हमें क्या करना है? इस कांस्टेंट को इवैल्यूएट करना है। we've got a point x equals e when t equals 2. let's input that. x equals e, t equals 2, ये यहाँ पे इनपुट कर देते हैं। Hashim, it would have been very difficult by parts because parts by parts आप क्या करते? 1 over x आता और मतलब you would have x raised to power minus 1 and then ln x whole raised to power minus 1. ये सिंप्लीफाई होना ही नहीं था, राइट? आप किसको u लेते, किसको dv over dx लेते, वो सिंप्लीफिकेशन आपको इंटीग्रेशन में पार्ट्स आप करते रहते, इट वुड नॉट हैव सिंप्लीफाइड, ओके? सब्स्टिट्यूशन खालिद जब भी आपको यूज करनी होती है हमेशा क्वेश्चन में गिवन होती है। ए लेवल के सिलेबस के अंदर सब्स्टिट्यूशन आपको जब भी करनी होगी हमेशा क्वेश्चन के अंदर दी होगी, ठीक है? तो if you are not given a substitution, most likely there's going to be another more efficient way of doing this, ठीक है? Okay. अच्छा, let's do this now. Let's input these values. x की value e input कर दें, minus ln of ln e that equals ln of 2 plus c. ln e क्या होता है? 1, so we get minus ln of 1 equals ln 2 plus c. ln 1 is 0. 0 minus ln 2 equals c. c की वैल्यू हमारे पास minus ln 2 आ गई, ठीक है? So now, yeah, so we have some space. Now the equation that we're getting is going to look like this: minus ln of ln x that equals ln of t minus ln 2. c की जगह पे हमने ln 2 minus ln 2 डाल दिया। Now this is the solved differential equation. आपने differential equation solve कर लिया इस point के ऊपर, ठीक है? अगर उसने सिर्फ solve करने के लिए कहा होता, this would have been your final result, but you need a specific form in your final answer, and that is x in terms of t. x को आपने subject बनाना है, x को subject बनाना है और फिर आपको simplify भी करना है अपने आंसर को। So how do you make x the subject now? How do you make x the subject now? आपने logs को remove करना है किसी तरह, ठीक है? logs को कैसे remove करें? लेफ्ट साइड में माइनस आ रहा है, इसको as it is भी रहने दे सकते हैं, but let's actually take that negative to the right side. ln of ln x that equals ln 2 minus ln t. पूरे इक्वेशन को मैंने माइनस से मल्टीप्लाई कर दिया ताकि लेफ्ट साइड से हमारा लॉग खत्म हो जाए। हमें करना क्या है? इस x को हमें किसी तरह से बाहर निकालना है। ये जो x अंदर आ रहा है हमारे पास, इस x को किसी तरह से बाहर सब्जेक्ट बनाना है, ओके? सो व्हाट वी कैन डू इज, we know that the base of ln is e here. We've got the base of ln as e here. We can take that to the other side, ठीक है? तो हमारे पास क्या हो जाएगा? ln x that equals e raised to power ln2 minus ln t. That's the first thing that we do here. ठीक है? So we are getting ln x equals e raised to power ln2 minus ln t. And then what do we do at this step now? We can again apply the same rule again. Okay, इसकी base पे e है, इसको हम दूसरी side पे लेके जा सकते हैं. But now let's stop at this point. उसने मैं क्या कहा था? उसने मैं कहा था आपने simplify करना है अपने आंसर को. अब देखते हैं राइट साइड को पहले हम कुछ सिंप्लीफिकेशन कर सकते हैं इसके अंदर कि थोड़ा सा आंसर हमारा जो है इससे बेहतर फॉर्म के अंदर आ जाए. Let's break it down. I'm going to do that here. ln x equals e raised to power ln2 divided by e raised to power ln t. Can I write it like this? ये नेगेटिव पावर है ना, तो उसको मैं चलिए एक स्टेप और कर लेता हूँ यहाँ पे. I can do ln x equals e raised to power ln2 multiplied by e raised to power minus ln t. So I can break it down like this first, and then this thing can go to the denominator, and we get something like this. Now remember, e and log, they are inverse functions. ये एक दूसरे को opposite होते हैं. आप ये कैलकुलेटर भी ट्राई कर सकते हैं. e raised to power ln2, ये आपको क्या रिजल्ट देगा? ये आपको 2 रिजल्ट देगा, बिकॉज e और log एक दूसरे को नलिफाई कर देते हैं. दे आर ऑपोजिट्स ऑफ ईच अदर, दे आर इनवर्स ऑफ ईच अदर. आपका रिजल्ट 2 आ जाता है. सिमिलरली अगर आपके पास कहीं पे होता ln of e raised to power 2, ये तो आपको पता है 2 यहाँ पर आ जाता है, वो 2 ही बन जाता है. बट यू कैन जस्ट यूज द इनवर्स लॉजिक हियर एज वेल. log and then e, they are inverse of each other. What are you left with? You're left with 2. तो e raised to power ln2 जो है ना, ये हमारे पास 2 आ जाएगा. Now let me just write down the general form here so that you remember that. E raised to power ln of something हो ना आपके पास, e raised to power ln x, that's always the same thing as x, because e और ln एक दूसरे का inverse होते हैं, आपके पास x बच जाते हैं. So what do you get from this? You get ln x equals 2 over t from this. So that's much simpler, right? Because ये e और ln एक दूसरे से cancel out कर देंगे, ये e ln एक दूसरे को cancel out कर देंगे. We're left with 2 over t there. ठीक है? And now we can take this base here to the other side again, and we get x equals e raised to power 2 over t from this. And that's our final result. That's x in terms of t. And that's in a simplified form. अच्छा, अगर आप ये सब कुछ नहीं करते और आप इसको let's say इस तरह से कर देते हैं, यहाँ पे x equals e raised to power ln2 minus ln t. इस स्टेप से आगे, well, that's correct, but that's not in the simplified form. तो आपको इसका 1 मार्क शायद नहीं मिलता. You would still get 6 marks for this. ठीक है? 6 or at least 5 तो मिलेंगे, but maybe 6. I'm not sure about the 6, but at least 5 you'll get. लेकिन इसको simplify करके लिखेंगे इस तरह से, तो फिर आपको full marks मिलेंगे. ठीक है? All right. So that's what we have. That was question number 7. Again, इसका last part was a bit tricky. जो हमने इसको change किया उस form के अंदर. Khalid, that's absolutely correct. If you look at the syllabus document, you are explicitly given there that that candidates are only expected to use a given substitution to do integration. So whenever you are supposed to use substitution, you will always be given that substitution. हमेशा वो बताएगा आपको. ठीक है? अगर substitution उसने नहीं बताई, that means there is always going to be another method of doing that. So generally how I teach is, I say whenever you've got a product, दो चीजें multiply हो रही हैं. Let's say you've got one expression and another expression, ये multiply हो रहे हैं एक दूसरे के साथ. Integration में दो ही methods होते हैं आपके पास, या integration by parts या substitution, right? Substitution होगी तो उसने बताया होगा, अगर नहीं बताया तो वो integration by parts ही है. That's the only option you've got for a product in your syllabus. ठीक है? Product के लिए वही कर सकते हैं essentially. ठीक है? Okay, let's move on. Now it says, hence state what happens to the value of x as t tends to infinity. Okay, हमारे पास ये क्या value आ गई थी ऊपर? We were getting x equals e raised to power 2 over t. ये आ रहा था ना? x equals e raised to power 2 over t. Okay, now let's think about this. What happens as t goes to infinity? Again, यहाँ पे सिर्फ आंसर का मार्क होता है, तो आपको इसकी वर्किंग को शो करना जरूरी नहीं है. You can think about what happens when you've got a very large number here in the denominator, or again, you can use that trick that we just talked about earlier. t की जगह पे कोई बहुत बड़ा नंबर डाल दें और कैलकुलेटर में डाल दें. तो कैलकुलेटर में आप क्या डालेंगे? 2 over an extremely large number. So you can say 99999, add as many 9s as you want and see what that gives you. Okay, so or you can say 2 over 10 raised to power 10. You have calculator में डाल दें and see what you get. I'm going to try that on my calculator and see what I get. E raised to power where's e? E raised to power 2 divided by 10 raised to power 10, so that's almost going to be 0. So ये मेरे पास approximately आ जाएगा e raised to power 0. e raised to power 0 क्या होगा? वो 1 आ जाएगा. Your final answer is going to be 1 here, right? You can think of it logically as well. किस तरह से आप कहोगे t बहुत बड़ा हो जाता है, denominator बहुत बड़ा हो जाता है, तो 2 over t क्या होगा? 2 over an extremely large number, it's going to be approximately 0. ये 0 के आसपास हो जाएगा पावर. e raised to power 0 पर आप करेंगे तो वो क्या आ जाएगा? वो 1 आ जाएगा. Or you can use this trick, आप बड़ा नंबर डाल दें, कोई बहुत बड़ा denominator t की जगह पे, you will get 1 from that from the calculator directly. There's a large plantation. This is question number 10 that we're doing next now. A large plantation of area 20 kilometers square is becoming infected with a plant disease. At time t years, the area infected is x kilometers square. Achha, so what are the variables that we've got? Time t years, area infected, that is x kilometers square. So we've got the area infected and we've got the time. The rate of increase of x is proportional to the ratio of the area infected to the area not yet infected. Okay. When time equals 0, x equals 1, and dx over dt equals 1. Achha. When the area infected is x, what about the area not infected? Not infected kitna area hoga? That will be 20 minus x square, because 20 is the total area. उसमें से x square minus कर दें, x minus कर दें, sorry, 20 में से x minus कर दें. That's the area that's not infected. Okay. So what we have here is that the rate of increase of x क्या मतलब है? dx over dt is proportional. जब उसने सिर्फ proportional रखा हो, you assume it's directly proportional. अगर inversely होता, उसने inversely mention किया होता. अगर सिर्फ proportional रखा है, that's directly proportional. dx over dt is proportional to the ratio of the area infected, that's x, to the area not infected, so x over 20 minus x. That's what we've got. ठीक है? That's what your relationship turns out to be. अब इसको उस फॉर्म में लिखें, ये आपके पास proportionality है, proportionality constant डाल दें, equation आपकी क्या बन जाएगी? kx over 20 minus x. That's the equation. Now you've got to find the value of k, क्योंकि यहाँ पे इसने आप शो करने के लिए कहा हुआ है, उसमें k की टर्म्स में नहीं रखा हुआ, k की वैल्यू 19 उसने रखी हुई है. तो उसने एक पॉइंट दिया हुआ है आपको, उसने बताया कि dx over dt is 1 when x equals 1. तो ये इनपुट कर दें इसके अंदर. Input x equals 1 and dx over dt equals 1. ये इसके अंदर इनपुट कर देते हैं. We get 1 equals k into 1 over 20 minus 1, and that gives us k equal to 19. So the differential equation therefore turns out to be dx over dt equals 19x over 20 minus x. ये हमें prove करना था. That's the first part. ठीक है? Okay. All right. Achha, solve the differential equation and show that when t equals 1, the value of x satisfies this equation. Okay. इस differential equation को हमें solve करना है. dx over dt equals 19x over 20 minus x. and show that when t equals 1, the value of x satisfies. Oh, what happened? Go back there again. Question number 10. Okay, we were here. Acha. dx over dt equals 19x over 20 minus x. We have to solve this differential equation and show that when t equals 1, the value of x satisfies this equation. Okay, let's solve this differential equation. Solve करने के लिए क्या करते हैं? We take, we separate the variables first. यहाँ पे t तो है ही नहीं, x ही है सिर्फ. x वाली सारी टर्म्स को लेफ्ट पे ले जाते हैं. We get 20 minus x over 19x dx. On the right side, we've got dt. Let's integrate both sides. इधर इंटीग्रेशन का साइन लगा दिया, इधर इंटीग्रेशन का साइन लगा दिया. But now, of course, when you integrate both sides, left side is going to be integrated with respect to x, and the right side is going to be integrated with respect to t. Right side is pretty straightforward. Right side पे क्या आ जाएगा? Right side पर simply आ जाएगा t dt 1 dt. So अगर कुछ भी नहीं लिखा हो तो you can basically assume it to be 1. You've got 1 dt, 1 can integrate with respect to t. क्या होगा? T होगा. And you've got a constant here, t plus c. That's what we've got on the right side. अब left side को कैसे integrate करें? 20 minus x over 19x. How do we integrate this? Any quick ideas? Quick ideas क्या करें? Fraction है. Can we apply the log form here? 19x का derivative 19 है. ऊपर 19 आ सकता है किसी तरह से? नहीं आ सकता. Tan inverse form लगती है? नहीं लगती. वही form नहीं है. ऊपर constant नहीं है. Partial fraction तो उसमें sense नहीं बनती. आपके पास a के factor है नीचे. What do we do then? क्या करें यहाँ पे? Product बना के इसको integration में parts लगाएं? Or is there something simpler that we can do here? We can actually break the fraction, right? देखें ऊपर दो terms आ रही है ना, 20 minus x. हम क्या कर सकते हैं? We can break it into two parts. You can say it's 20 over 19x का integral minus x over 19x का integral. So we can break it down into two parts like this. ठीक है, दो parts में break कर लिया. 20 over 19 पूरे को बाहर ले जाना. That's a constant, right? वो पूरा constant है, constant को उठा के बाहर लेके जा सकते थे. And then we could just integrate the part that is inside. उससे क्या होता है? ln के अंदर हमारे पास थोड़ी सी simplified form आ जाती है. We would get 20 over 19 ln x minus 1 over 19 x equals t plus c. Now we can multiply 19 on the other side. That's 20 ln x minus x equals 19t plus 19c. c के साथ आप बेशक आप उसको c को आप नया कांस्टेंट बना दें और उसको कहें कि अच्छा this is 19, this is just another constant. Now d या उसको 19c करना चाहे वो भी कर सकते हैं. That's your choice. अब क्या करना है? अब वो वैल्यूज इनपुट कर दें. क्या वैल्यूज इनपुट करनी थी? x t equals 0 and x equals 1. Let's input them. t equals 0, x equals 1. To keep it that way in case anyone gets confused. 19c हो गया ये हमारे पास क्या आ गया? 20 ln 1 minus 1 that equals 19 into 0 plus 19 times c. ln 1 0 हो गया. 0 minus 1 that equals 0 plus 19 c. c की वैल्यू यहाँ पे हमारे पास आ रही है minus 1 over 19. ठीक है, इस तरह से हमारे पास minus 1 over 19 c की वैल्यू आ गई. Now we've got that equation. That equation is 20 over 19 ln x minus 1 over 19 x equals t minus 1 over 19. And if we just multiply the whole equation by 19, we get 20 ln x minus x equals 19t minus 1. अब हमें क्या करना है? We want this form, x equals e raised to power 0.9 plus 0.05x. राइट साइड पे e की पावर में कुछ आना चाहिए. राइट साइड पे e की पावर में कुछ आना चाहिए. तो हम लेफ्ट साइड पे क्या करेंगे? लॉग टर्म लेकर आएंगे और बाकी सब कुछ राइट पे ले जाएंगे. उसने कब कहा है? When the value of t equals 1. तो यहाँ पे हम t की वैल्यू 1 इनपुट कर देते हैं. तो t की वैल्यू 1 इनपुट कर दें पहले, and then we have to convert it to that form. t1 इनपुट करेंगे तो हमारे पास क्या आ जाएगा, we will get 20 ln x minus x equals 19 minus 1, and that becomes 20 ln x equals 18 plus x. ठीक है? Now this gives us ln x equals 18 over 20 plus x over 20. अब उसने ऊपर decimals में रखा हुआ है वो, अब इसको अगर decimals में लिख दो, this basically becomes ln x equals 0.9 plus 0.05 x. So x equals e power 0.9 plus 0.05 x. आप ये जो e base थी उसको दूसरी साइड पे ले गए, उसकी बेस बन गई, and you get that result जो आपने प्रूव करना था. Okay, so that's what we could do here. That's slightly quicker. Leave what as C? Yes, you can leave it as C. So I just left that as C eventually. So that's fine. Okay, let's move on. Let's do the last one now. Iska ek part hai. In fact, the next part is use an iterative formula based on the equation in part B. I'm not going to do this. I'll just tell you the iterative formula. Hum aap kar lenge uske baad. What's the iterative formula based on the equation in part B? Equation is x equals e power 0.9 plus 0.05 x. Iterative formula क्या हो जाएगा? Left side पे आपने n लगा देना, n plus 1, और right side पे आपने n लगा देना x के साथ. ठीक है, ये आपने यूज करना है. Initial value of 2 उसने आपको बता दिया, आपको x1 क्या लेना है, x1 आपको लेना है 2. ठीक है, use this formula. Make sure that you're taking care of the number of decimal places और उनकी rounding off सही करनी है. Last decimal place आपने round off करके लिखना है. ठीक है, you can do that. उसके बाद वो कहते हैं calculate the value of t at which the entire plantation becomes infected. Okay, now let's think about this. Iteration वाला part आप खुद करेंगे, अब देख लेंगे. Last part में उसने क्या कहा है, at which the entire plantation becomes infected. So you have x equals e raised to power 0. अच्छा नहीं, वो तो t की वैल्यू 1 इनपुट की थी हमने. इक्वेशन क्या आई थी हमारे पास कहीं पे, before inputting t equals 1, we had this equation. This was 20 ln x minus x equals 19t minus 1. This was the relationship between x and t that we got. अच्छा, entire plantation gets infected का क्या मतलब है? If you look at the question, total plantation आपके पास कितनी है? It was 20 kilometers square. So x is representing the infected area. तो आप क्या करोगे, यहाँ पे x की वैल्यू को सिंपली 20 इनपुट कर दोगे कि सारी की सारी इन्फेक्ट हो गई है. सो व्हेन यू इनपुट x इक्वल 20, आपके पास t की वैल्यू आ जाएगी 20 ln 20 minus 20 equals 19t minus 1. Calculate t from this and that will be result. ठीक है, इसमें आप उसने कोई आपसे कहा नहीं एग्जैक्ट वैल्यू, तो आप डेसिमल्स में लिख दोगे 20 ln 20 minus 20 plus 1 divided by 19, and that gives me 2.153, or you can write it to three significant figures. That's 2.15. Okay, so from the curve shown, for the curve shown in the diagram, the normal to the curve at the point P with coordinates x, y. So this point P has coordinates x and y, meets the x-axis at n. So in normal जो आ रहा है आपके पास curve का, it's what happened there? This normal meets the x-axis at this point n. N पे जाके आपको नजर आ रहा है, it meets the x-axis. Okay, now what do you have to do? The point M is the foot of the perpendicular from P to the x-axis. So you can see that here as well. Point M जो है P से एक perpendicular बनाए x-axis के ऊपर, तो ये point M मिलता है हमें. Now the curve is such that for all values of x in this interval, the area of the triangle PMN is equal to tan x. Now that's an important piece of information. इसका यहाँ पे लिख लेते हैं. Area of the triangle at PMN is equal to tan x. एक ये information इसने दिया यहाँ पे. Now we have to show that mn over y equals dy over dx. Now that looks rather complicated. Mn over y equals dy over dx. Okay, now let's think about this. Mn is this length. Y क्या है? Y is basically this length. ये आपका y है, right? Because y coordinate क्योंकि p का y है, so this vertical length is y here. Mn over y is given to be dy over dx. अच्छा, dy over dx क्या होता है? dy over dx is the gradient of the curve at any point, or you can say gradient of the tangent, right? dy over dx क्या होता है? Gradient of the tangent at any point. और हमारे पास Pn क्या चीज है? Pn जो है, this is the gradient of the normal. Pn is the gradient of the Pn is the normal to the curve. तो हम क्या कर सकते हैं? हम एक्चुअली इसमें ये कर सकते हैं, हम gradient of normal निकाल लें. Gradient of the normal. What is that going to be? Gradient of normal. Pn की बात हो रही है, Pn का gradient. Gradient क्या होता है? Change in y over change in x. लेकिन y में जो change है यहाँ पे negative है, right? आपको gradient negative होना चाहिए, y में change negative है, तो इसका gradient क्या हो जाएगा mn का? That's going to be minus y. Change in x, what's that? That is mn. So minus y over mn. अच्छा, ये तो हमारे पास यहाँ से आ गया. Gradient of normal should be minus y over mn. Now, where does dy over dx come from? Let's think about that. Tangent का gradient क्या होता है? वो हमें पता है, dy over dx होता है ना? Gradient of tangent, that is dy over dx. अगर इससे आप normal का gradient निकालो dy over dx से, तो वो क्या बन जाता है? इसका negative reciprocal, right? dy over dx का negative reciprocal क्या होएगा? It's going to be minus dx over dy. So we've got the gradient of the normal here. We've got the gradient of the normal here. What we can do is we can equate them, and that's going to give us a relationship. Just say hopefully rearrange करके हमारे पास ये आ जाएगा. Let's try that. Let's equate both of them. So I'm basically equating this thing because this is the gradient of the normal, and this is also the gradient of the normal. They should be equal. इन दोनों को अगर हम equate कर दें, हमारे पास क्या आ जाता है? Minus y over mn equals minus dx over dy. Now we can, so we can just cross multiply. mn वहां पे चला गया, एक तो माइनस माइनस खत्म हो गया, mn उधर चला गया, y भी उधर चला गया, dy इधर ले आए, dx इधर ले आए. So basically बस इंटरचेंज कर दे दोनों साइड्स को, या फिर अब ये करते हैं रेसिप्रोकल लेने दोनों साइड्स का. दोनों साइड्स का रेसिप्रोकल ले लें, इक्वेशन है ना, दोनों साइड्स का रेसिप्रोकल लेने, माइनस खत्म कर दें. We end up with that same thing directly. mn over y equals dy over dx. Minus signs तो खत्म हो गए थे ना, because they get cancelled. And then we take reciprocal of both sides, we get this that we wanted to prove. ये हमें prove करना था. ठीक है? Looks pretty complicated actually. It's very different from what we usually see. It's a very non-standard question, but I hope that makes sense. तो सोचना पड़ा यहाँ पे. अच्छा, उसके बाद वो कहते हैं hence show that x and y satisfy this differential equation. Okay, so आपको पिछला part use करना है, इस चीज को use करना है. यहाँ पे हमारे पास क्या चीज आ रही है? tan x पे आ रहा है. tan x क्या था? रिमेंबर उसने आपको ये एक रिलेशनशिप दिया हुआ था, एरिया ऑफ ट्राइंगल इज इक्वल टू tan x. ओके, अच्छा, एक तो पिछला पार्ट यूज करना है, वो हम यहाँ पे लिख लेते हैं. पिछला पार्ट हमने क्या प्रूव किया? वी हैव प्रूव्ड mn over y equals dy over dx. Now we've got another relationship there, and that is that the area of the triangle PMN is equal to tan x. PMN का area जो है, that is tan x. Area of triangle PMN क्या हो जाएगा? It's a right angle triangle, half into base into height. area of triangle PMN is tan x half into base into height. MN आपकी base है, height क्या? Height is y. So we basically get this relationship. ठीक है, एक तो हमारे पास ये relationship आ गया और left side पे जो हमने पिछले part में prove किया था वो भी आ गया. Now what do we want at the end? हमें prove क्या करना है? We want to show this differential equation. इसमें क्या क्या चीजें आ रही हैं हमारे पास? इसमें हमारे पास आ रहा है y आ रहा है, dy by dx आ रहा है, tan x आ रहा है, mn नहीं आ रहा कहीं पे. mn is nowhere to be found here. जो इक्वेशन शो करनी है इसमें mn नहीं है, तो हम क्या करते हैं, mn को एलिमिनेट कर देते हैं इक्वेशन से. लेफ्ट वाली इक्वेशन से अगर मैं mn को सब्जेक्ट बना दूं या राइट वाली से mn को सब्जेक्ट बना दें, दैट्स योर चॉइस. किससे भी mn को सब्जेक्ट बना दें, दूसरे में जाके इनपुट कर दें. अच्छा लेट्स मैं राइट वाले पे mn को सब्जेक्ट बना देता हूँ. आई गेट 2 tan x over y. And now let's input that in the first equation. इसको यहाँ पे जाके input कर दें. We get 2 tan x over y. और ये पहले से एक y है. So it's going to be y into y. On the other side I've got dy over dx. Now I can make tan x the subject. Tan x को यहाँ पे रख लेते हैं. बाकी सब कुछ right पे ले जाएं. Y into y is going to be y square. 2 वहाँ पे चला जाएगा. 1 over 2 बन जाएगा. So we got 1 over 2 y square dy over dx, and that's what we wanted to prove there. हमने कर दिया. इसको rearrange करके लिखना चाहे लिख सकते हैं. 1 over y square into dy over dx, that equals tan of x. This is what we wanted to prove there. All right, ये आपका second part हो गया. Let's move on to the next part. अब next part देखें. It says given that y equals 1 when x equals 0, solve this differential equation to find the equation of the curve expressing y in terms of x. This part is actually pretty straightforward. Let's try to be quick. दिल से कर लेते हैं. Differential equation को solve करना है. कैसे solve करते हैं? We separate the variables first. Variables already separated हैं एक तरह से. We have 1 over 2 y square dy. dx को right पे ले जाएं. tan x dx. Let's integrate both sides. Integrate कर दें दोनों sides को. Left side with respect to y integrate होगी, right side with respect to x integrate होगी. Half y square का integral. Simple power rule, half as it is. Y की power increase कर दी. y cube over 3 equals tan x का integral. Tan x का integral कैसे करते हैं? We write it as sin x over cos x. And then we use the log rule. How are we going to use the log rule here? We say cos x का derivative क्या होता है? Cos x का derivative होता है minus sin x. Cos x का derivative is minus sin x. तो हम ऊपर किसी तरह से minus sign कर देते हैं. कैसे करेंगे? We can put a negative sign inside. यहाँ पे अंदर minus कर देते हैं, but then to balance that, we have to put a negative sign outside as well. बाहर हमने minus sign लगा दिया to balance that. अब इसका इंटीग्रल क्या हो जाएगा? लेफ्ट पे तो हमारे पास आ गया 1 over 6 y cube. On the right side we've got minus ln of the denominator, because ये वो वाली फॉर्म आ गई है. यहाँ पे डिनोमिनेटर का डेरिवेटिव ऊपर पड़ा हुआ है. इसका इंटीग्रल क्या होगा? log of the denominator and then plus c. This is what we get from this. अब क्या करेंगे? c की वैल्यू फाइंड कर लें. इसने क्या दिया हुआ है? इसने दिया हुआ है x equals 0, y equals 1. Let's input that here. That's going to give us 1 over 6 equals minus ln cos of 0 plus c. Cos of 0 1 होता है. yeah, cos of 0 1 होता है. ln 1 0 हो जाता है. c की वैल्यू क्या आ गई आपके पास? c की वैल्यू आ गई 1 over 6. Let's input that back in the equation. We get 1 over 6 y cube equals minus ln of cos x plus 1 over 6. That's what we get. Now we have to make y the subject. उसने कहा था y in terms of x show करना है. एक तो 6 को जाके वहां पे right में multiply कर दें. We get y cube equals minus 6 ln of cos x plus 1. And now you can take cube root to get y in terms of x. Cube root ले लें. Minus 6 ln of cos x plus 1 whole raised to power 1/3. क्यूब रूट की फॉर्म में लिखना चाहिए, उस फॉर्म में लिख दें, इस तरह से पावर फॉर्म में लिख दें, पावर आपकी हो जाएगी 1/3, and that's the final result that we get from this. I hope that makes sense. Now let's move on to the last one from this paper. Okay, so the last question. Question number 10, right? That's what you guys are asking about. Let's do this one and then we end. Now, a tank containing water is in the form of a hemisphere. The axis is vertical. The lowest point is A. This is vertical, the axis of the hemisphere. The lowest point is A and the radius is R. The depth of water at time t is h. Depth means height of water, right? Or the depth of water, that is h. At time t equals 0, the tank is full and the depth of the water is r. Okay, so hemisphere. We know the formula for volume of a hemisphere. For a sphere, it's 4/3πr³. For a hemisphere, the volume formula would be 2/3πr³, right? Half of that. In fact, they have given us this here. Okay, so they've actually given the volume formula in terms of H, not in terms of R. All right, we'll use that. The depth of the water at time t is h. That's another variable. So we've got h here as well. We're talking about time. At time t equals 0, the tank is full. So that means at time t equals 0, the volume is volume of water in the container is the same as the volume of this hemisphere because it's full. At this instant, a tap at A is open and water begins to flow out at a rate proportional to square root of h. The tank becomes empty at time t equals 14. So when the time is equal to 14, tank becomes empty. The volume of water in the tank becomes 0. Volume of water in the tank is V when depth is h. It's given that V equals this. We have a relationship between volume and height that they've given. Show that h and t satisfy a differential equation of this form, where b is a positive constant. Now, how do we think about this? Okay, so the tank is full initially. Initially, it says the tank is full. And the water just begins to flow out then. What's the rate of outflow of the water? It flows out at a rate proportional to square root of h. What does that mean? Water is measured in terms of volume. dV over dt. dV over dt, what is that going to be? That's going to be minus k into square root of h, right? It's flowing out. Its rate of decrease. The change is negative. So when we talk about dV over dt, it's going to be negative like this. Minus k into square root of h. Now the problem is we have dV over dt. What we actually wanted to find out was dH over dt. For that, we would have to use chain rule now. Remember, that's what we do when the information given is in terms of one variable. In this case, they gave information about the volume. And then what they want you to prove is in terms of h, you have to use chain rule for this. How do you do that? You've got v in terms of h here. Let's find the derivative of this to find dv over dh and see what that turns out to be. 1/3 into pi, that's a constant that remains as it is. Why did we add minus k? It's proportional to square root of h, right? The water is flowing out. Since it's flowing out, it's negative. K is proportionality constant. And we are saying k, the value of k is supposed to be positive, right? That's why we're putting negative sign outside. Because they're talking about outflow in this case. We have to put a negative sign there explicitly. Okay? So K is proportionality constant. We have a negative sign outside. Okay. 1/3 pi into 3r(h²). What's the derivative of this? Now, what's the radius? Okay, now think about it. Radius is also fixed. Okay. Radius of this hemisphere, that's not changing. That's fixed. So 3r, that's also a constant. 3r is also a constant, right? So 3r also remains as it is. What's the derivative of h²? 2 times h. This is what we get. Minus the derivative of h³, that will be 3h². Now let's simplify this. It becomes pi/3 multiplied by 6rh minus 3h² inside. Divide each term by 3. 6/3 gives you 2. That's 2 pi rh minus h². That is dv/dh. Now, what is dh/dt going to be then? What do you use for that? You use chain rule for that. dh/dt, that's what you want to find out. So you can say dh/dt, that equals, you have two fractions. In the first fraction, you have dh as the numerator. In the second fraction, you have dt as the denominator, pi h². Okay, thank you for that. We have pi h² here. I did not multiply by pi here. This was I h². Thank you. Okay, so dh/dv into dv/dt. That's the chain rule that you would be using here. What's dh/dv? Reciprocal of this. What does that become? 1/2 pi rh minus pi h² into dv/dt, which is this thing, that's minus k into square root of h. Now we need to somehow convert it to this form. How do we do that? In the denominator, we have 2 pi rh. Pi is not there, so we have to take pi common outside. Let's do that. Let's take pi common outside. And in the numerator, we've got minus k as well. I'm taking minus k over pi common outside. What are we left with inside? In the denominator, we have 2rh. 2rh is for 1/2 and minus h². Okay, let me write it like this first. In the numerator, it's under root h. That's h raised to the power of 1/2. In the denominator, we're left with 2rh minus h². Right? Now, this h power 1/2, I could take that to the denominator, right? Because in the form that they don't have any h in the numerator. So I can take that h to the denominator. If I do that, I can write this as 1/h raised to the power minus 1/2. Right? I've taken this under root h to the denominator. And now if I multiply that inside, that gives me minus k over pi into 1/2r h raised to the power 1 minus 1/2. What does that become? 2rh raised to the power 1/2 minus h² into h raised to the power minus 1/2. 2 minus 1/2, the power becomes 3/2. And that is what we wanted in the denominator there. 2rh raised to the power 1/2 minus h raised to the power 3/2. And now they're saying b is a positive constant. Now you see, we've got this constant here. Our constant is k over pi. K is a constant, pi is also a constant. We can say this whole thing is a constant. So we could say b is, we could write this as another constant, and they're calling this constant b. We know that k is positive, pi is positive. We can say b equals k over pi, and we could write this differential equation as dh/dt equals minus b over 2rh raised to the power 1/2 minus h raised to the power 3/2. Okay, so we're just treating this fraction as just another constant, and they named this constant b. So we are naming that b as well, and we say, okay, this can be written in this form like this. That's your differential equation. That's what we wanted to prove in the first part. Make sense? That's the first part. Now it says solve this differential equation or obtain an expression for t in terms of h and r. How would you solve this differential equation? Now you have to separate the variables. Remember, r is a constant. Treat this as a constant that will remain as it is. You have to find your answer in terms of r. Okay. All right. So what do we do for this? Let's separate the variables. This will come to the left side and it becomes 2r h raised to power 1 over 2 minus h raised to power 3 over 2 whole times dh. On the right side, you have minus b dt. Let's integrate both sides. We have separated the variables. There was no t here, so we just had to take h to the left side, and we have done that. Let's integrate the left-hand side. 2r is a constant that remains as it is. Integration of h power 1 over 2. Add 1 to the power, it becomes 3 over 2. Divide that by that new power. Minus h raised to power 5 over 2. Divide that by that new power. That's 5 over 2. On the other side, what's the integration of minus b? It's minus b times t, and you have a plus c here as well. Okay, this is what we get. Now, what do you want to find out? You want to find t in terms of h and r. We need to find the value of b and c somehow. How do you do that? What information do we have? We know that when t was 0, the tank was full, and when t was 14, the tank was empty. Okay. Let's use this condition first. When time is 14, tank is empty. What's the variable that we have? H. Depth of water will be 0. That's 1 point. T equals 14 and h equals 0. Let's put that here. We say, let's input t equals 14 and h equals 0 first of all. Let's see what that gives us. 2 goes to the numerator here. It becomes 4 over 3r. In place of h, put 0. 0 raised to power 3 over 2 minus 0 raised to power 5 over 2 or 5 over 2 equals minus b into 14 plus c. We get an equation in terms of c and b. It's going to be 14b equals c. That's one equation. Now what we do is we put the other value of t and h. What's that other value? Do we have another information given here? Depth of water at time t is h. At time t equals 0, the tank is full. Now when the tank is full, what's the height of the water? The radius of the hemisphere was r. So the height of water is r at time 0. So at time 0, what this means is h is going to be equal to r. That's what you input here. Since you want your answer in terms of r, that's all right. Now you say, let's input t equals 0 and h equal to r in this equation. What does that give us now? 4 over 3. Again, this 2 goes to the numerator. It becomes 4 over 3 into r raised to power 3 over 2 minus. I can take this 2 to the numerator as well. It becomes 2 over 5. H raised to power 5 over 2. That means r raised to power 5 over 2. On the other side, you have minus b into 0 plus c. What does that give us? 4 over 3 r raised to power 5 over 2. 1 plus 3 over 2, that's 5 over 2 minus 5 over 2 raised to power 5 over 2 into r raised to power 5 over 2. That equals c. This is the value of c that we're getting. If this is the value of c that we're getting, what's the value of b going to be then? This whole thing divided by 14. So 14b equals c, right? That's what we got earlier. We can just use that. We can say 14b equals c, and that will give us the corresponding value for b as well. Let's do that. Is this all right until this point? 4 over 3 r raised to power 5 over 2 minus r raised to power 2. 2 over 5. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. This is going to be 2 over 5, not 5 over 2. Okay, so that's C what we're getting. Now let's find B as well. If we know that this is C, what about B then? 14B equals this thing. So B would equal 1 over 14 times 4 over 3 r raised to the power 5 over 2 minus 2 over 5 r raised to the power 5 over 2. That is going to be the value for B. Okay, that's what B turns out to be. Now we simplify this and see what that gives us. Where do we need B at the end? B into T, and we want to make T the subject at the end. Okay, all right. So this is what we get. If we want to simplify this, we can do that. Let's simplify this and see what that gives us. 4 divided by this 2 over 21. 2 over 21 r raised to the power 5 over 2 minus 2 over 5 and 14. That's 1 over 35. 1 over 35. We could actually simplify this. Why did I not simplify this actually? Couldn't we simplify this? C actually becomes 4 over 3 minus 2 over 5. These are the same terms. This is actually giving me 14 over 15. 4 over 3 minus 2 over 5. 14 over 15 r raised to the power 5 over 2. We could actually simplify that first, and then we could input that here. That makes things simpler. So it's 14 over 15 r raised to the power 5 over 2. And that actually becomes B equal to 1 over 15 r raised to the power 5 over 2. This is what B turns out to be. Okay. Now we've got C and B. Now put these values back in that original equation and see what that gives us. Again, I'm writing 2 in the numerator. It becomes 4 over 3 r h raised to the power 3 over 2 minus 2 over 5 h raised to the power 5 over 2. On the other side, you have minus B. B is now known. That's 1 over 15 into r raised to the power 5 over 2 times T plus C. C is 14 over 15 r raised to the power 5 over 2. You just have to make T the subject now. So take all terms to one side. Apart from T, it becomes 4 over 3 r h raised to the power 3 over 2 minus 2 over 5 h raised to the power 5 over 2 minus 14 over 15 r raised to the power 5 over 2. On the other side, you have minus 1 over 15 r raised to the power 5 over 2 times T. Just multiply this whole thing on the other side, and that will give you T equal to, I'm multiplying 15 on the other side, and r will go to the other side. It becomes r raised to the power minus 5 over 2. This goes to the other side. It becomes 1 over r raised to the power 5 over 2, which can be written as r raised to the power minus 5 over 2. And then 15 goes to the other side. It gets multiplied. This negative goes to the other side as well. I'm multiplying the left side by minus 15. Okay. Let's see what that gives me. 15 into 4 over 3, that's 20. So I'm getting minus 20 r into h raised to the power 3 over 2 plus 15 into 2 over 5, that's 6 h raised to the power 5 over 2 plus 14 r raised to the power 5 over 2. And this is T in terms of H and R. You could simplify this. You could multiply that R inside if you wanted. If you do that, it becomes minus 20 r raised to the power minus 5 over 2 plus 1. That's minus 3 over 2 into H raised to the power 3 over 2 plus 6 r raised to the power minus 5 over 2 into H raised to the power 5 over 2 plus 14 into r raised to the power this into r raised to the power this. That just becomes 1. So it's r raised to the power 0. Now, if you want, you can write it like this: minus 20 h raised to the power 3 over 2 over r raised to the power 3 over 2. plus 6h raised to power 5 over 2 over r raised to power 5 over 2 plus 14. This is t in terms of h and r, and that is what we were looking for.